The first time I entered into our sanctuary here at St. Anne's, I was struck by the beauty of this space. It is a feeling that I know is shared by many, and it's a reality that we as Christians have embraced throughout the centuries of our faith. Travel in Europe or around the world, and some of the most beautiful architecture you will find are church buildings and spaces dedicated to the worship of God. And that's a bit of a tension with our faith, too, isn't it? When we hear the teachings of someone like St. Francis or of Assisi, or even Jesus at times in his ministry, sometimes it seems difficult to reconcile the expense and the energy and the resources that are taken up by building these beautiful buildings and places of worship. But that's a tension that we encounter in this week's gospel as well, where Jesus and his disciples are feasting with Mary and Martha and Lazarus, and Jesus is anointed with these expensive oils and perfumes. And Judas, now we hear in the gospel, Judas has ulterior motives for why he criticizes this, but he does. He criticizes this effort and this experience of anointing Jesus. And Jesus rebukes Judas in that moment and speaks to the abundance of the gift that is given in that moment, and speaks to the truth that when we live fully into our faith, we are called to live abundantly. That doesn't always mean living in austerity. And that's a reality that in this time of Lent, in this time of giving up, in this season of living and doing without, we find juxtaposing with the priorities and the passions and the things that we sort of focus on in this season of Lent, and what it is that we hear in this gospel lesson for this upcoming Sunday. But those are not so staunchly opposed to one another as they might first appear. This book series that we are working through on Tuesday evenings from Diana Butler Bass on her book Grateful helps us to reconcile that tension. Because the reality of Lent and the reality of this season of doing without to kind of refocus our perspective is precisely to refocus it around the act of abundance. Because the truth of the world, friends, is that we all live in abundance. And when we all live fully into what God is offering the world, it is a reality of abundance. And the problems that we confront and the difficulties that we are faced with come from the place of misappropriation of that abundance. It is when that abundance is unequally shared. It is when that abundance is used oppressively that we find the pain and the hurt and the sorrow that seem so often to surround us. But when we live fully into God, we are not called to live in austerity, but in abundance of the gifts that God has given us. Now that abundance might look different for each and every one of us. Sometimes it is this resource or material abundance that we can share. But sometimes it's an abundance of energy, or an abundance of enthusiasm, or an abundance of grace. We all have abundances that God has blessed us with. And we all have the opportunity now and every day to share those abundances more fully. So this week, of Lent, I encourage you to think about what those abundances are in your life and how you might more fully share them with the world around you. What talents, what resources do you have to give? And how might you more fully give them in expressing the gospel to those to whom you go? This week, out of all weeks of Lent, I think we encounter the truth of God's grace as abundance more than any other. And as we journey through this week, as we prepare together this Sunday for worship, I encourage you to spend some time in reflection, considering what the abundances are in your life and how you are called to share them. Blessings, friends, today and always.